So it's my pleasure to welcome Ben Law this morning. He is a director for the government of Alberta, working out of the Consulate General of Chicago's office. And thank you for joining us, Ben. Alberta is one of my favorite provinces. I've been there several times. I've been to Edmonton. I've been to Fort McMurray in the north, the oil sands. And maybe the most unique place I visited was a strange place called the Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump in southern Alberta. And it's where the Indigenous Blackfoot tribe for centuries, I think over 5,000 years, would drive buffalo off a cliff to their death. So that's why it's called Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump. It's a World Heritage Site and one of the most unique things I've ever seen. So we're pleased to have a presentation on the province of Alberta, which reminds me of the American West every time I go. So Ben, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Professor. Good morning, everyone. I come to you from my apartment in Chicago, where it's 14 Celsius, but for you, it's 57 Fahrenheit, so it's nice and comfortable. I know it's warmer than it is at home at this very moment. I head home tomorrow morning for a quick work trip home and very much looking forward to it. I'm sorry I couldn't join my colleagues earlier this month in that very room. I had a long planned vacation that was supposed to be made in November of 2020. And of course, that never happened. And then after that, not even 24 hours later, I had to go to Wisconsin. And then this past weekend, I was in DC. And so I just got back, and you'll understand that I'm a little tired of flying in metal tubes. And so thank you for your attention. I also want to thank my colleague, Colleen Duke at the consulate, who, recognizing my lack of time and preparedness, started the slides. And so I want to give a shout out to her. I realize I'm holding you from noon hour, from lunchtime. So I'm going to try and make this as painless and as quick as possible. I'm going to rush through a lot of things. So if you're interested in any of the details, please ask the good professor, or you have the disposal of the internet to do your research work. Colleen asked that I introduce a bit about myself. I am from Edmonton, Alberta. It's the capital city. It's in the northern part of the province. It's often cited as the northernmost major city in Canada, which places it pretty north, and I'll explain to you what sort of perks and benefits that comes with. I have always, primarily my life, my work has been in public relations or corporate communications, however you want to call it. And then back in 2013, I was tapped to serve the mayor, and I was his senior advisor for 8 years or 2 terms. We don't have a party system there, nor do we have term limits, but it was the first time that we went from a 3-year term to a 4-year term, and so 8 years was plenty. And then after a short bit of contract work, I put in my name for this job, and it was either Seattle or Chicago, and I thought Chicago would be more interesting, would be more challenging. I get to deal with diverse people, and I've been at the consulate for about 1.5 years now. I work down the hallway from a lot of the folks that you spoke to or that you heard speak to you back early this month, and so that's how I'm here. Although I am considered a diplomat in terms of U.S. customs, I am selfishly advocate for all things Alberta. That's who signs my paychecks. That's whom I represent. And I am one of 3 regional directors. We've got my colleagues in Seattle to look after the West, as well as in Dallas to look after the South. We have an office in the embassy in Washington, DC, that's been there since 2004. We were the first one to open in the Canadian Embassy, and that looks after Capitol Hill and the East Coast, all the way from the Northeast to Florida. maybe with that, I'll just go ahead and talk a little bit about Alberta. This picture you're seeing in front of you is one of my favorite spots in the world. It's Banff. It's the premier national park, I think, in Canada's national park system. This is Banff Avenue, the main drag, the main street, if you will. And of course, this is wintertime. In fact, starting with COVID, and I think they've kept it even to this day. In the summertime, they basically blocked off Banff Avenue for car traffic and let people browse, walk on the streets. Restaurants have set up eating areas. And it's one of the most magnificent places on earth. It's getting rather expensive, I'll be honest, and it's getting clogged with a lot of traffic. But it is the probably number one spot on a lot of visitors' hit list to the Rocky Mountains. And so if you have a chance, go up there, take in that mountain air. It's as fresh as you can get. And it'll do you a lot of good. It certainly puts me in a really good mood every time I visit the place. All righty. I am advancing the slide and it's not advancing. There we go. To give you some context, this is, you'll know that this is Canada, second largest country on earth. And in red is where Alberta is. We are one of only two landlocked provinces in Canada. You'll notice that to the west, I don't know if my arrow shows up, but in the west is British Columbia. This is the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. This is the province of Saskatchewan. Moving to the map on the right, you'll see that we are right above Montana. Montana is a pretty large state in that sense. For context, we are about 255,000 square miles. The most comparable state, U.S. state to Alberta size is Texas. Texas is just a bit larger. California is about 2/3 the size of Alberta. We're about 4 times the size of Missouri, but we don't have the population that Missouri has. So you're a far more populated place than we are. In the western part, the southwest, the curved border here, we are hemmed in by the Rocky Mountains, and in the west is what you might call the Great Plains, is what you see in the Dakotas. This is very fertile farmland. And then the north is forestry. And as Professor mentioned in Fort Mac, that's the sort of the logistical point for all the oil sands, all the oil that comes to the US. I mentioned some of the perks of being this far north. Our sun doesn't really quite go down until about 10:30 on June the 21st, the longest day of the year, which means that our fireworks on July 1st, our version of 4th of July, cannot start until 11 p.m. because if you launch them any earlier, you can't see them. On the other hand, on December the 21st, you go to work in the dark, you come home in the dark. So it can make for very long, dark nights. But we have fun with that. We embrace our winter. We make winter sports our very own. But we're also smart. We come down south to get some sun and good pheromones going. Some of the more popular U.S. states we go to include Arizona, specifically Phoenix, and Scottsdale and Tempe. We've also got flights to Palm Springs, California, to some degree Florida. I'm not sure if Missouri has made the hit list yet, but it's a matter of time, I'm sure. But also to the Caribbean cruises, Cuba. Canadians make up the largest visitor group to Cuba, believe it or not. So we try to make the most of our winter. We haven't been always very good at embracing our winter and winter sports, but different cities have different initiatives to change that behavior. For millennia, let me just give you some context. I hope you can see my arrow. This is roughly where Alberta is present day. But for millennia, this part of Canada has been on the trading route, has been on the route for people on the move, and there is archaeological evidence to back that up. And so traders and settlers have been going through this area for millennia. I'm going to do a disservice to history by cutting it really short, but needless to say, our history is tied to the Hudson's Bay Company, which set up forts all around this part of the world. In fact, Edmonton, the capital city, was first settled by the Brits on the edge of the North Saskatchewan River. In fact, where downtown is today, that's where Fort Edmonton was. We've since moved some of the original buildings downriver to become the country's largest outdoor historical heritage park. And if you ever make it up there, that's worth a stop. With land was subsequently transferred to what was called the Dominion of Canada at the time in 1870. You have to remember, Alberta was not a province then yet. Alberta didn't become a province until 1905. So to give you some historical context. Subsequent to the land transfer, the land was opened up to settlers, colonial settlers. It was a preference for colonial settlers in exchange for negotiations with Indigenous people of the day to cede their land, give up the rights, and to move elsewhere. American settlers, let's see, my notes say there were whiskey traders and hunters who came up from the south, and they made their home in southern Alberta. What followed, to put it mildly, was a bit of warfare, starvation, so on and so forth. That's where the current day RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, came in and set up base in Fort Macleod in southern Alberta. And that's where we fast forward to where we are today, where the province came into formation in 1905. Canada came to be by the building of a railroad, a national railroad from coast to coast. In fact, as you may have heard from my other Canadian colleagues during their visit earlier this month, our history, our heritage is very much defined by the building of the railroad. You'll see the picture on the top right-hand corner, and people of all persuasions were attracted to come build the railroad, including a significant population of Chinese migrants, often subjected to torturous conditions, a lot of casualties involved, but finally came together. And the RCMP in their uniform, that's very identifiable and iconic, became very much a standard of how we settled. There was conflict between Indigenous groups and the Canadian and the government of the day, following which then American settlers moved in, and as I said, Alberta became a province in 1905. Again, because we know this is being recorded for posterity, I need to caution you that I'm glossing over the history because of time, that there's so much more, there are nuances, there are lots of gray to our history depending on whose version it is, and so please keep that in mind as you listen to this presentation. About 5% of our population is Indigenous, and half of them are what we call First Nations. Less than half is Métis, and 1% Inuit. Inuit are the people from the Northern Territories. First Nations, these are people who belong to a First Nation living on or off reserve. They have unique traditions, protocols, cultures, and we have more, to understate it is to say we have a blemished history with our Indigenous peoples. And so Canada as a whole is undergoing a reconciliation process for it. I'm hoping you'll include that as part of your learning of Canada. In Alberta, there are something like 48 First Nations and chiefs. The most commonly spoken languages are Cree, Blackfoot, Chipewyan, Dene, and Stoney, which is also known as Nakota Sioux. I mentioned Métis. If you don't already know what that is, it's basically the French derivative of the French word that says that means the intermarriage of Indigenous women and European men in the day. And Alberta is the only Canadian province where there's a recognized Métis land base, and that's where you see the different divisions, MNA regions. Those are the Métis settlements. With the First Nations, we have treaty settlements, treaty agreements, and that's where you see the different color strips. My home is on Treaty 6 territory, and so we very much acknowledge where we live is on Treaty 6 territory. Of note, I mentioned that Alberta has we have about 5% Indigenous population. Edmonton, the capital city, has the second largest urban Indigenous population in the country, second only to Winnipeg, and growing all the time. We have a diverse province. We are a province of about 4.8 million people. It's growing fast. It's probably the fastest growing in the country. Just in the last year alone, we grew by, 200,000 people. That's the equivalent of 2 mid-sized cities in Alberta. So that, of course, puts pressure on housing, on infrastructure, on social services, and a whole lot of other things, and we're feeling the pressure. That said, we continue to be one of the most, I think, affordable and desirable places to live. We are increasingly attracting immigrants from around the world, but also from within Canada, especially from British Columbia and from Ontario, where your average home price of $1.5 million is a little out of reach for a lot of people starting out. And when you can buy a home for about 400 Canadian in Edmonton and about 600,000 Canadian in Calgary, the other city, you see the perspective where it is more affordable. Your dollar goes much farther. It's been said that we are the most urbanized province in the country. Yes, we have a couple of big cities, but most people actually live in cities. And this is in Alberta, a city, you become a city with 10,000 people minimum, but most of them are in larger cities, 50, 60,000 to 100,000, and then the other two cities, which I will talk a bit about. The corridor between the two cities is probably one of the most urbanized segments in the country, playing second only perhaps to the Ontario, Windsor to Quebec City corridor. I've been talking about the cities lately. This is the city of Calgary. It is the largest city in the country, city in the province. It's about number 4 in all of Canada. It has a population of 1.5 million people. You can see the mountain range behind you. It's about an hour and a bit to the Rocky Mountains. So it is a gateway to the Rocky Mountains that way. It is flanked by it's bisected by the Bow River, as you can see along the right-hand side. You may have heard of the Calgary Stampede, which brands itself as the greatest outdoor show on earth. That's when in early July, it is the biggest stampede around. It's where the city basically shuts down for 10 days. There's no work. All productivity shrinks or goes down. It's basically 10 days of mayhem, and I put that in the best way possible. Pancake breakfasts all over, receptions, corporate parties, the rodeo, of course, chuck wagon races. I was lucky to be there this past July. We brought a whole schwack of American legislators, and I think they had a really great time. We also brought them to Banff. Calgary is probably got its came to a lot of people's recognition when they hosted the '98 Winter Olympics. I remember being in Edmonton waiting outside, waiting for the Olympic torch to pass. It was a very cold and long wait, following which we all immediately dashed inside. It was one of the colder days that winter. It is Canada's other corporate office capital, second only to Toronto. A lot of our energy companies are there, but also increasingly a hub for aviation companies, technology companies. In fact, it beat out Vancouver to be the second largest attraction of venture capital in all of Canada last year, though. So that's a significant milestone. Missouri is home to CPKC, the merged railway company. Calgary is the corporate headquarters for CPKC. CP, Canadian Pacific, as it used to be called, is based in Calgary. And so I share that bond with you folks, and so that's a significant connection. They have a hockey team called the Calgary Flames. They don't do as well. They haven't been doing as well, but we're hoping they will. And we also have the Canadian Football League. I'm going to assume that it's new for you. There's subtle differences between the CFL and the NFL. The NFL field is smaller. The midfield for NFL is 50 yards. Ours is at 55 yards. And our end zone is 20 yards deep. Yours is 10 yards deep. So little differences like that. We've got a lot of American players up playing for the Canadian Football League, whether as a post NFL or they didn't quite make the NFL, they'll come up. Quite often when you see them on the news, they'll be sporting their southern accents, which gives us a chuckle. But we welcome everyone. It's nothing compared to the NFL. It's much more. It's junior, but it gives us something to look forward to in the summertime. Moving, so this is a 1.5 million. Remember, the population of Alberta is about 4.8, so 1.5 is here. The other third lives in Edmonton. This is my home city, so I'm a little biased about it, I'll be honest, but I am here to represent all of Alberta. It is the capital city. The building on the left-hand side with the pyramid is City Hall, and I worked right in the middle there for 8 years. It is the population is about 1.1 million now, but because it's like I'm going to use a very Canadian reference, we're like a hole in the donut. We're surrounded by a metro region of a few 100,000 people. So metro, it's about 1.4, 1.5 million, kind of equal to what Calgary has, maybe a bit smaller. So 1/3 of Alberta lives in Calgary, 1/3 lives in the Edmonton metro region, and the other third lives everywhere else in Alberta. So you can see how urbanized we are. You'll see the picture on the right-hand side of the Northern Lights. It's not unusual for us to see it, even through the summertime, although it's a little harder. You have to wait until the sunset. But we've got this aurora alert from the University of Alberta, which sends you emails when things come alive. So the last few months, when there's been a lot of sighting, I've seen and I've received a lot of pictures of the Northern Lights being absolutely brilliant up north. We are sometimes known as a gateway to the north because we are the logistical base for the oil industry up north, the transport industry as well. But we're also the gateway in terms of where people of the Northern Territories come down to have fun, to have a vacation, to stock up on goods. Believe it or not, a lot of the diamonds that come up from up north in the Northwest Territories will inevitably come through Edmonton. And so something exciting about that, we're a bit of everything. The middle picture there, the upper triangle, is West Edmonton Mall, which is North America's largest shopping and entertainment complex. I've lost count of how many shops there are, but what you see there is the water park. And so when it's brutally cold in the wintertime, a lot of people go inside and it comes with waves every half hour or so. You've got slides. You can do a variety of things in there. It's very warm. I have never spent any time inside other than stopping by to show visitors, but always busy. A lot of fun with kids. Similarly, in terms of sports, we have the Edmonton Elks for CFL, and we have the Edmonton Oilers, the hockey team. If you are a fan or if you know anything about hockey, we made the playoffs. We made the finals, in fact. And I don't know if you can see on the screen, but I have paraphernalia here. This is our logo, the Edmonton Oilers, and we were in the finals. I remember the 7th game. I watched it not in Chicago here, but I watched it in St. Louis. We had a Midwestern Agricultural Conference, and so there were 2 other Canadians and me who watched in the bar, but it wasn't meant to be. The Florida Panthers got it at the very last game, but it got my home city very excited, very proud. I own, my condo is downtown. It overlooks the arena, and videos that were sent to me it was just hectic. People were crazy. People were in such a good mood. It's one of those few things that bring together virtually every Edmontonian, and to some degree, some Albertan, even Calgarians would say they were cheering for the Oilers. And perhaps for that reason, Lonely Planet has recommended us as one of the top places to visit in 2025. So check it out. Here's our gross domestic product. It shows the different sectors that produce for the economy. You'll see that natural resources, oil and gas, is huge in our sector. You should know that, let's see, I've got some stats here on Alberta exports to the US and to Missouri. Last year, Alberta exports to US was about 164 billion US dollars, and of that, about 700 million was to Missouri. It changes over time from year to year, but most of what we export is, it should be no surprise, energy, wood, because we have a lot of forest products, as well as plastics, which is a derivative of the energy industry. Missouri sent to Alberta chemical products and machinery. I mentioned the energy industry. You should know that Canada is the largest supplier of all forms of energy to the US. In fact, Alberta is responsible for virtually all of it. We account for about 56% of all your energy imports. You've got Saudi Arabia, which is at single-digit level, but we quietly export. We account for more than half, some would say almost 2/3 of your energy imports. We have the fourth largest reserves in the world, and we've barely scraped it. And you see this maze of pipelines that bring the oil down to the US. In fact, the Midwest is where 75% of our oil come through, and they go to refining in Louisiana, in Oklahoma, in Indiana, in Illinois, as well as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and all other points. They supply your home heating, they supply your vehicles. They are also then converted to plastics and other derivative parts. For example, the glasses I wear, that you wear, the phone that you have in your hands requires some form of product that is a part of the energy industry. But we're also well on the path to cleaner energy. We have a goal of net zero emissions by 2040. Our hydrogen industry is growing fast. We produce about 20% of what the US produces as a volume, and we expect way more. American investors have come up, put their confidence, whether it's through Dow Chemical or Air Product from Pennsylvania. And so there's a lot going on. We have weaned ourselves off coal completely, and our methane reduction efforts are ahead of schedule. And so there's a lot of good news stories. We are pioneers in carbon capture. Some of the world's largest carbon capture pipelines are in Alberta, and we've been doing it for quite a few years now. So something to share with everyone, as well as learnings. Natural areas. We have vast natural areas and habitats. I've mentioned some of the national parks. I mentioned Banff National Park, which is our premier park. There's also Jasper National Park. Regrettably, it was affected by fires this summer. About 30% of it is out of commission, but they've started reopening. The province has put a lot of significant resources in investing in its recovery and its rebuilding. And so together they home of lots of biodiversity. Our universities are some of the leading players in the country, in the world. In fact, people come from around the world to study in Alberta. We have 26 post-secondaries. That includes Canada's largest trade school. We have 12 universities, so 26 post-secondaries includes vocational colleges, other post-secondaries, but 12 universities. What is so special about our universities? Well, artificial intelligence. The University of Alberta, my alma mater for my undergrad degree, is ranked second only to Carnegie Mellon in North America for its use of AI. The grandfather of reinforcement learning, computer chess, still works at the University of Alberta, and he still teaches there. So we attract a lot of people there. We've got an amazing engineering school, a medical school, and let's see, farming, of course. Um, we have the Edmonton Diabetes Protocol for islet cell transplant. Calgary's home to extremely vigorous, strong innovation sector, startups and otherwise. But also the world's first hepatitis B antiviral. We have energy research, we have live research, crop sciences. In fact, I tried to put together an Illinois startup with the University of Alberta agriculture folks to see if they can work together on field research. And I'm about to go home tomorrow because we're signing an agreement, University of Alberta signing agreement, University of Illinois Champaign on a carbon capture exchange of knowledge and scholars. So pretty excited about that. And I think that is pretty much what I have. Where are we in time? We are at 11:33, so we have some time for questions and I hope richer discussion. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
So if you have a question, I'd like you to ask it into the microphone since this is being recorded and it's also on Zoom currently.
I urge you to come up and visit. Any one of you, I can barely see you, but any one of you watch The Last of Us on HBO a couple of years back? It was all shot in Alberta. The first season was shot throughout the province, including my hometown. I didn't realize they were in town. One day I was walking down from my condo and I noticed that where there's usually no cars or very few cars. There were all these cars fenced in and with light dusting on them of dirt. And I was wondering if I missed some storm, but in fact, it was the set for The Last of Us. Our legislature, our provincial legislature, masqueraded as the Massachusetts state capital. So little things like that. But they went to the Rocky Mountains, they went up north, and so that got us a lot of fame and put us across a lot of screens in the world.
I thank you for your talk. I wondered, you've convinced me that I should come north and visit. So I guess I'm really asking for students, how easy is it to do study abroad, to do a transfer for a semester? Do you have suggestions about that?
I don't off the top of my head, but it's not unusual for exchange students to come and visit the different institutions. They're all pretty much decentralized, but there are certain schools that are of certain scale and size that would be helpful. So University of Calgary, University of Alberta would be the prime ones, especially if there are like programs. But certainly if you can get me an email through Chad, I would love to connect you with the folks. And since I'm going to see some of them on Monday and Tuesday, I will pop that question about logistically how that works. We attract a lot of American faculty members because we're always looking for people to come and teach, and they make Canada their home. But we're also a bargain for you guys. We're much less expensive, especially in comparison to U.S. private schools. The dollar's in your favor. You get 30% more in your dollar in Canada. So whether as a student or as a visitor, things are way cheaper there. And we're the only province with no provincial sales tax. So that's something where your dollar will get stretched even further.
So just a word about the Stanley Cup Finals. All the Americans I know were rooting for the Edmonton Oilers because how could you root for the Florida Panthers, a team in Miami, Florida? They shouldn't even be playing hockey in Florida. I think that's wrong. And so I didn't know a single person who wanted the Panthers to beat the Oilers, and we were all quite pleased when the Oilers won the Stanley Cup.
Awesome. We were told that a lot of folks were also resistant about, and I say this with humor intended, that they could or some American friends couldn't support the Panthers because they were an expansion team. They were not part of the original. So thank you for that vote of confidence. And in fact, a lot of teams, whether American or Canadian teams, have a good chunk of Canadians anyway. So we're represented in one way or another.
So if I were to spend a semester or a year in Alberta, my concern would be the cold, the frigid cold. I'm sure you have mechanisms for dealing with that. You mentioned the Olympic flame coming through Edmonton and you couldn't wait to get back indoors. How do you cope with the extreme cold?
Well, the weather has fluctuated through the years, and I'll be the first to admit I've gone soft living here in Chicago. Although that lake cold is that lake wind is something else. But you know what? The best way to tell you about this is that life goes on. Dairy Queen continues to open and does strong business in the middle of winter. Ice cream does well. Life goes on whether it's at the movie theater or the transit system or we go to work. Now, I'm old, and so I recall only one day in my schooling years where things were shut down, and it rarely ever does. I think you guys call them a snow day here. It rarely ever shuts down because we are one of the northernmost cities. Some background: 90% of Canadians live within 200 kilometers, or is that what, 120 miles of the U.S.-Canada border. Where we in Alberta are far north of that. Cross-border shopping is not really part of our lexicon because we're a bit distanced from there, and so we learn to cope. Be hardy, folks. And you layer on because you've got to be ready for entering a building that's warmer and then going outside. We give our cars a little head start. We start them. We get the engines running a bit, but it's about layering, having a good parka. Jokingly, some people have this thing called the long john index, and so that warns you whether you need to wear long johns. But hey, even 2 days ago, when I was still in Arlington, Virginia, I was about I was out and about in my shorts, and I saw someone with a puffy jacket. So it's hard to prescribe a one size fits all solution for everyone, but you embrace it, you make the most of it, you take part in winter festivals, and so rather than hide from it, you go out and do it. Could we do a better job? Absolutely, we can certainly learn from the Europeans. The Danes do it really well. They eat outside with blankets and heating lamps for long into the fall and winter. We could do the same as well.
So it makes sense that you, because you're so northern, that you have all these great winter activities. What do you guys do in the summertime? What kind of fun activities can you do from inside?
Uh, if you have a house with a yard, you make the most of it. You are out in the greenhouses by April or May, getting ready your plants. Uh, uh, you've got folks who are very proud of their lawn. We live for summertime. We embrace summertime sports. We're out there in the River Valley. Some background, both cities have this extremely huge River Valley flank green space flanking the both of our rivers. In fact, Edmonton's River Valley is the largest urban parkland in all of North America. People think of Central Park. We're 22 times the size of Central Park. You can, in the wintertime, you can ski, cross-country ski, do almost anything. In the wintertime, you can golf to your heart's content at 3 municipal run golf courses. You can run, you can jog, you can bike. You can do a Segway tours. You can you can row down the river, get off at different points. You can paddle boat, but also festivals. Our cities are well known for their festivals. For example, in Edmonton, we are the home of the largest music festival in Canada that gets sold out every year. It's the Edmonton Folklife Festival. We have the Fringe Theatre Festival. I will be biased. I am a longtime volunteer of it, paying me to give it up. It is the largest and longest running Fringe Theatre Festival in all of North America. Some would say second only to the original one in Fringe. It's about independent theater. For $15, you take a chance and invest in an up-and-coming play. There are all sorts. There are children's festivals. But people drive to the national parks. We camp like crazy. As soon as the camping reservations open, it's just clogged with reservations. Lots to do. Concerts. You have to, one thing about Northern Alberta is because we are sort of in the middle of a huge uh, uh, area, a lot of big name acts, whether it's Rolling Stones or I'm sorry, I'm not big on popular music, but a lot of the big names will come to Edmonton, and then people will bus from all over to come to our stadium because our stadium sits 60, 70,000 people. Folks will come from all over to catch the acts. The Stanley Cup hockey playoffs lasted until June, so July was a little dead because we didn't know what to do with our evenings anymore. I didn't know how to talk to people anymore. And so that was a lot of fun. But we embrace both seasons equally, but probably more so during the summertime. It's a lot of fun because we have such long days. If you're a hardcore golfer, you can get 3-4 rounds in because you can.
What is something that, in your opinion, Canadians do better than Americans?
Ooh, that's a trap question. Typically, our elections have been concluded within hours. Sorry.
Okay.
You know what? I say this with all sincerity. I've been here for a year and a half now. I see a lot of things that Americans do well, but I also see a lot of things that Canadians do well. Here's some personal anecdotes. And I'm not saying you do it better or we do it better. I drive occasionally, even in downtown Chicago. And and as pedestrians, I'm so used to just walking across the street where there's a crossed walk. And I had to learn very quickly that just because it's marked doesn't mean you have the right as a pedestrian. You have to, cars will just zoom by. So when I'm driving and I see someone about to cross the road, I instantly hit the brakes. Consciously, I just do that. Subconsciously, I just do that. And I know I've had a few pedestrians look at me going, "Why aren't you driving past?" And I even wave them, and they sort of wave back with some surprise. When I'm in lots of traffic and a car yields to me to get into a particular lane, I pass them and I'll wave back. And I realize I am the only one doing that. So it's hard to say, just like there are differences within your country regionally, there are differences within our country regionally. For example, I went to graduate school in upstate New York, and even our vocabulary is a little different. A multi-level parking structure, let's say it's downtown, we call it parkade, Parkade. In central Canada, they call it parking garage or parking structure. So there are lots of differences, never mind between countries, but even regionally within our countries, as you know. But I see myself, I see this as a good fit being in Chicago for me. It's the Midwest. Some people jokingly call it flyover country. I relate to that a lot. We're taken for granted. We are the breadbasket. We are the economic engine of the country. And so there's a lot of similarity and consistency in my being here, and I kind of get it that way. People are a lot more down to earth in the Midwest. I found much more friendly. They take themselves less seriously and are much more helpful to each other. And I'm really enjoying my time here for those reasons. I know I'm trying to evade your question, but I hope I've touched some of it on a personal anecdotal level anyway.
No, and I would add, in my opinion, Canadians are better mannered than Americans, more polite. There's a stereotype that Canadians are always apologizing, whether or not they're in the wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever met a Canadian that I didn't like or that I disliked. They're so friendly and outgoing, and I guess that's the stereotype of here in the Midwest as well. So certainly the two countries have a great deal in common.
Yes, you're right. The word sorry is one that's used to characterize and stereotype us, but we do that. One joke is that, a Canadian will be walking the sidewalk and hits a lamppost and will apologize to the lamppost for getting in its way, even the lamppost was there to begin with. So yeah, you're right, Chad, totally. I found there are little cultural differences, but again, it's my own, and so I don't know how indicative it is of the country. Tell you what, there was for a while there, Alberta was a target of American investment as call centers. I was wondering why the heck they would come up to Alberta? Well, because we don't put on a heavy accent, although I'm told I have one, that we enunciate and that we are neutral that way. We're not the South. We're not anywhere else, and so we could be mistaken as Americans, and maybe that's what they were trying to get at.
That's a good point. Well, we'll go ahead and end on that note. Thank you for sharing such important information about your province, and I hope that this audience has the opportunity to visit Alberta, maybe Banff, maybe Jasper, one of the most beautiful places on earth, without a doubt. So thank you, Ben, and have a good trip home tomorrow.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Chad. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.